started in 1 second. Let me get the last thing that we did up here.
Where's Elaine?
I don't know, because she's the one. Oh, maybe that's her. Yeah, that's her.
There she is.
There she is. Okay. Greetings, everybody. And I do know that I mean, I've heard a few things here and there about wanting to change our meeting time. So I'm gonna, hey Shannon. So I'm gonna send out a request to everybody for general things that would work for you, and then if we change, then we'll narrow it down via doodle poll or whatever other poll there is out there. So I'm aware of that, and that will go out to everybody who signed up. So we will go from there. The only other thing I wanted to cover for about 4 minutes, because it relates to zoning ordinances, housing, and people's feelings about housing, is I'm going to ask John. I'm going to put John on the spot because he's closest to it. Some of you know that dockside construction has started, and there's Eunice. Hi, Eunice. And that has created some challenges. So it relates to all of our topics, but I'm going to let John kind of briefly tell you what's been going on, and we can talk about if there's things that we want to address.
I don't know how many of you are familiar with that property, but I don't know what the words backs up to, but it essentially adjoins the Holiday neighborhood, which is Holiday East and West, and the only way in is on Holiday Avenue, which basically is one side of this project. Well, the construction crowd has continually kept that road amiss, I guess is the lack of a better word. You know, whether it be dirty, dusty, muddy, they've had it torn up, putting in sewage lines, et cetera, et cetera. So those homes back there, and I don't really know how many homes that is, but I'm guessing it may be as many as 40 residents back there. It's a number of townhouses, condo, well, not, yeah, mostly townhouses. There are a few freestanding homes back there, and they all are front the lake. But the bigger issue too is that and I don't know how this happened, and I think it will be asked tonight, because I think some of the residents are actually going to be at city council meeting to speak publicly. I don't know why there wasn't a buffer. I don't know where the buffer should have been. I don't know. I mean, I do where it should have been. There should have been a significant buffer between Holiday West, the road, and essentially the building. I mean, they may have owned the property up to at the end of it, but they could have easily put a wall up, and then the building could have been back. I mean, I personally think it should have been 100 feet. But
so
either
they
way,
came to the Board of Zoning Appeals about that, and there was a lot of discussion around it, and that was definitely supposed to be in place, some sort of either landscaping or a wall or something. I'd have to look back and see what the final decision was.
well, Lillian, what happened was Rick came to the zoning group to y'all about the height.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, that was his dispute. And so
yeah,
the truth of the matter is that, you know, y'all looked for a grievance and you didn't really find a grievance from the height. The truth of the matter is, in retrospect, now we know better, is that if he'd have come forward with a grievance about the buffer, I believe you guys y'all would have acted on that, because there is no buffer. And I mean, I don't really know. I mean, and that's the question probably Todd's going to have to answer tonight. Is the buffer decided from the rear of the building to front of the building? I don't know. But even if it's from the rear of the building up against Holiday Avenue, I don't think much of a buffer exists. So the property.
Yeah, you're right, because we were only talking about along Holiday going in, I think,
right,
where the fence was going to be and all that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a mistake on a lot of our parts, not knowing any better. So anyway, that's water over the dam. But the truth of the matter is that neighborhood, in my opinion, at least for the time being, has been completely compromised. And I mean, it's a shame. We sat here and watched it happen to just a few, about 4 or 5 homes on Riggs Drive when the parking garage was built for, I think the Finley project or whatever the case may be. So you've got 3 or 4 homes there that looking at light all throughout the night, every night. And so that was shame on us that happened, but then shame on us it happened again. Now, in this particular case, the property was built as zoned. And so, but I have to believe, and I should probably know the answer to this, but I don't. I have to believe there are buffers even in that kind of situation. So, but there are two things. Number one, the constant disruption to their lifestyle as we go through the construction phase right now. And then the other is the lack of a buffer. And thus, they've got, the only buffer they've got is the width of the road, which is probably 20 feet, maybe 25 feet. And that's essentially it. And that project is sitting right on top of roughly 20 homes.
Is there any way that they can go back in and do anything about that, or is it just too late?
I think it's way too late at this stage. Because I mean, they already, they're way down the road on the construction piece. I mean, sadly, but that's where we are. But it'll be interesting because I know that several of them are coming to the council meeting tonight. So if you want to listen, I don't know what will be said. I mean, it certainly will be acknowledged, but I don't know what will be said beyond that. It's just another terrible mistake that we've made in this city. There's no doubt. So anyway, Catherine, I guess, is that what you were looking for?
Yes, thank you. And it's just because it relates to our work in a couple of ways, one of which is trying not to repeat mistakes of the past would be great. The second is that when we talk about what housing means in zoning and ordinances, this is a case of we need to be careful in our zoning discussions. And I know Shannon has been coordinating so that maybe not our discussions are about zoning, but it does matter in terms of setbacks and other things that we put in the zoning regs of what is allowed and what is not allowed. So without getting into the Clemson politics of it all, dockside was going to happen no matter what anybody said. Yeah, and so that's the discussion, and people are going to ask us, why we didn't stop it. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that in case you drive down that way. The other thing that is a concern at dockside that is Fran McGuire's job is talking about the traffic and whether or not there's going to be a traffic light there, because there's some DOT, I hesitate to use the word rule, preference about beds and occupancy and traffic entering a highway, at what point you could have a traffic light. So that's another.
Catherine, I think that a light, from what I got, is approved, but what's going to happen is that the frequency, or I guess the timing on the light is going to be such that it is two things got to happen. Number one, you can't have traffic backing up on the bridge. And so I don't know what the distance is from that road to the bridge, but it's not significant.
Yeah, not far.
So at the end of the day, that light, the timing on that light will be almost to the point where it doesn't help a lot, because I mean, they let it, turn it green, and as long as the traffic doesn't back up on that bridge significantly, that's fine. Once it starts getting there, it's going to turn red again, and the people are going to be somewhat captured by that light or their ability to turn right on red. So yeah, that's another issue too. There's no doubt. It's gonna be a fun event come, I guess, the fall of 22. So we'll see.
Oh, I thought you were going to say fun at council tonight. That'll be fun too.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And then Elaine, did you have any quick update? Did we need to know anything about that happened from Planning Commission?
Just that we have approved the resolution, what's it called? Sorry, my brain's not working today. The strategic plan ordinance 1, I think is what it's called, but we have removed any residential component from the non-residential districts, and whether or not this remains permanent or not remains to be seen. But what's been proposed and what's coming before council, there's a public hearing tonight at 5:30 about that and 2 other changes, plus it'll be discussed and voted on at the council meeting as well. But it has to do with any residential component that a developer's wanting to add to our CCM, CP 1, 2, and 3 districts must come forth as a planned development. The good thing about that is we have a little more control about and figure out what's the best type of development for the location. So I would hope we would have had a little more control with the back buffers of dockside. If it'd been a planned development, we could have requested more with that. So I don't know. That's what they're discussing tonight. And we took out some things. I'm sorry, I don't have it handy with me right now. We took out some things related to density, only because I think I have it right here. Only because we didn't have the things, the teeth, in my opinion, the teeth in the ordinances already to support it. And there were three things we took out. Where student housing is allowed, a maximum occupancy shall be set. I think that should be the case in any planned development that comes forth, depending on the location of that planned development, what it abuts and all of that. Where student housing is allowed, annual inspections shall be required consistent with the city rental housing ordinance. The Planning Commission's concern was we don't have the staff or anything in place to do that. So that's why I say it doesn't have any teeth. And then the third one was the city shall require purpose-built student housing regulations and standards should the student housing be a component of the PD. Well, we don't have those regulations and standards in place either. So if you say you got to have those and then we don't have those to back it up, those were my concerns. And what the Planning Commission did was took those three things out and left the other pieces in there.
The last one again, so that would require that if I came forward with a PD, but I said this plan development is for student housing.
Yeah, it said if it's that they shall require purpose-built student housing regulations and standards.
Oh, okay.
Should student housing be a component of the PD? We don't have those in place. We don't have purpose-built student housing regulations and standards in place to enforce.
Right.
That's what I was concerned about, that we may be putting the cart before the horse, but I think that we're going to see that there's some people who might think it needs to still be in there. And I don't have an objection to it. I'm worried that if we don't have a way to enforce it, it's just going to collapse on us.
You have to have a way to enforce it.
So
Yeah.
let me jump in and just say that the land use group and the steering committee last week looked at this, and Elaine spoke to them about their concerns, Planning Commission's concerns, and they are starting this week. We are starting to draft those policies that we need in order to put those things back into that ordinance. So a definition for student purpose-built student housing and the regulations around that. And also, what was the other one? There was another one, the rental housing, looking at that as well. So if y'all are interested in that, I'd say tune in to the land use and development group this week. It's Wednesday, starting at 8:30.
So that's pretty much what we had with the Planning Commission. The other things tonight are related to grandfather rights, and then the use of allowing a public park area to satisfy the mixed use component of the plan development requirements.
Yeah, we got into that a couple of weeks ago. Okay, I don't want to waste anybody's time, and honestly, we've got public hearings at 5:30, so I have to be out of here, and so does John.
Me too.
Oh, okay. Okay. So thank you to everybody for the comments on the recommendations. What I'd like to do before we turn this over to Shannon as completed is just review them one more time with everybody's comments. And I think this one was already accepted, so there's no changes, but this is what we changed it to. Incorporate affordable and workforce housing into catalyst areas using plan development agreements and public funding where needed. And this, we did note that we needed to work with the land use and development work group to come up with a single statement probably. Establish a housing trust fund to support affordable housing development and accelerate the community housing foundation's work. This is the discussion that we wanted to change this probably to the Shaw Center. Somehow that's not here, but I will change it as soon as I get to my, sorry. we'll make that change. Continue to explore opportunities to allow and promote smaller lot developments through the zoning code. So that was what we wanted to do there. Any comment, questions?
Yeah, Catherine, we talked about that number 3, and my question was, and I'm not sure, I'm looking at the notes page I had. I don't have a hard copy of what he was. But do we want to add infill into existing neighborhoods? And that's what number 3 is saying. If we're gonna promote smaller lot housing in single family neighborhoods, it's essentially adding infill.
Okay, how can I add that? That will make sense.
Well, I think that's what she's saying, that do we want to support infill?
Yeah, right.
Because here's the thing with, let's just take any of our, well, I shouldn't say that, but I will say that most every neighborhood we have in this community right now is you go in and you do smaller lots. You're not doing anything to create an affordable housing opportunity, because the property is so valuable. It doesn't matter where you are, you go in and tear down a house and subdivide that property in any neighborhood, and you're not creating an affordable housing opportunity. Now, I say that I can think of several situations. There's a couple in Red Hill right now that I know of, and there may be one in Vista somebody was trying to point out to me on Saturday that I hope they connect back with me. But even my fear is, even if we go in there and were to allow that, I question if it results in what I consider affordable housing. And there may be those on this call that will debate me about the dollar amount. Now, I'll give you 3 or 4 examples, but 2 that come to mind. If you turn into Vista right now, you got Vista Circle and you got Vista Drive. Well, right there where the road kind of forks, there are 2 really new homes there that was a single lot that a developer bought, and I'm not going to name who it is, but it's somebody we all know and love. But anyway, he bought that property and built 2 homes there. And one of them sold for $130,000 and one of them sold for $150,000. The people that are in the homes are fine and they're very, very nice, but those homes, truthfully, are not what I call by definition affordable homes. And that was even in that neighborhood. So, and I think that property sold for, based on the gentleman that lived next door shared with me, I think that property sold and was then subdivided, but it sold for roughly $38,000. So you had $18,000 in each of those lots, which probably set that up to become an affordable house. But then when the construction was completed, like I say, the prices were $140, $150, and $130. And there's several other homes in that neighborhood that have been built by the same developer, and they've all sold in that roughly that same amount. So we are basically, in my opinion, somewhere above affordable housing and at what I would consider the threshold for workforce housing. Now, if that's what we want in those neighborhoods or any of our neighborhoods, that's a different story. But the way that thing is support the creation of affordable housing recommendations, I don't think fits. I'm sorry, I got on a soapbox there.
No,
I agree, John, and I'll use a really extreme example too. If you go to the end of Strawberry, where there was one single family home that was probably on close to an acre, and I'm not sure what they sold it for, maybe $700,000 or $800,000 for the house, and then the buyer tore the house down, divided it into 2 lots, and put 2 McMansions up there. That's not helping us at all with our cause.
Can I jump in, because I missed some of y'all's first meetings, and ask if you agreed on a definition or price points for what you would consider affordable housing and workforce housing? And if not, is that something you'd be interested in going back to do? So we're all working from the same definition.
Well, I think that I see where Chad's on here, so he's probably got some experience in this too. But this is the banker coming out of me, okay? So if you used $100,000 as your number and you went to amortize that, you're talking 600, and I think I figured out 663, and I think that's with a minimal down payment, which is what basically everybody would have in this case. Well, personally, 663 isn't an affordable payment for what I consider the folks that would be living in these homes. I think that the folks that live in these homes, and we may never be able to get here, but I think that the payment range for these homes is $350 to $500 a month. Now, Chad, if you disagree, please say so.
No, I don't disagree with that definition. I guess I want to play devil's advocate for a moment, because I think number 3 was one of the recommendations directly from the ClemsonNext consultants. And I know there's pushback on it. One of my arguments for doing that, though, would be that yes, a Strawberry Lane lot that's worth $1.5 million or something, or $1 million, split into 2, and you sell each one of those small lots for $800,000. That's not affordable at all, right? But there is a connection between those 2 lot sales and everything else that goes on in town. And so if those 2 $800,000 lots don't sell, they go buy another lot somewhere else that's more adjacent to affordable housing. And so I don't think you can, it's like a thread that's connected throughout the entire market. I don't think you can take one and say, just because that's not affordable, it doesn't affect the rest of the market. And so I think the principle behind that was, if you always don't allow the pressure to have smaller lots occur, you're going to keep driving the prices up everywhere. Like you're limiting the supply. That's the main principle behind it.
Right. But I agree. But I mean, can you sit there and say you can allow you can allow small lots in the Vista neighborhood, but you can't allow them in any other neighborhood? And I mean, and I guess the end game here, though, is you want to get to an affordable house. And so does the Vista neighborhood give you more of an opportunity? I don't know. I don't know. That's what I struggle with this.
Can I make a comment? My problem with number 3 is that as I sit on the property that I am sitting on, it seems to me what this committee is doing is it is making money for me. Okay. And I don't think you're going to be providing affordable housing as this property gets divided into 2, given where it is. I am not against R6. I worry about infill in this very small town. I would feel much more comfortable with number 3. I would strike it as it is. I'd feel much more comfortable with number 3 if it entertained other ways of trying to provide affordable housing for this town. And I don't see any other place where people are trying to do that except in number 3. And I don't think infill is the way to do it. Given the way the world works right now, home ownership is probably important. So I end up thinking about apartment condos. I end up thinking about townhouses. There are places where those things can go. And, so I guess what I would suggest is that if we're going to have a number 3, I would say that there would be a thorough exploration of how to achieve affordable housing.
Can I make a suggestion that has come up from another committee and that I don't see under your affordable housing, which is maybe this is an area where we want to recommend that we partner with Central and Pendleton and neighboring jurisdictions. If this committee is not interested in or doesn't see a way forward with this here, maybe it's we partner with other communities nearby that have a way forward to offer affordable and workforce housing, and we partner with them on creating equitable and easy to access transit in and out and through town. Maybe that's something that needs to be in these affordable housing recommendations.
And I think I think that's a great idea. I mean, but is it a matter of time before some of the same dynamics that are happening here happen in Pendleton? I mean,
yeah, and I don't think we don't want to put language there that's going to lead to people believing that we're saying this isn't possible in Clemson, so we have to look at these other places, because it is possible, So if we just careful with the wording.
Hang on. Eunice has her hand up. Eunice.
I'm just wondering in number 3, if we could say not just or instead of promote smaller lot housing, promote duplexes. Like in my neighborhood, if my house got torn down and it could be a duplex or a triplex, right? And that's not
Okay.
currently allowed. You can't have three last names, but my lot would support that, right? And so the house, like we have a house in my neighborhood that probably should be torn down, but if no duplex is allowed, but you can make more affordable housing. It's in the white paper by allowing more duplexes in our single family home neighborhoods without going to smaller lots.
I think that's a great idea, but I haven't seen it.
I think again, Eunice, you're gonna run into this, you'll end up in a fight. You know, let's just use your neighborhood, for example. If that became something that was proposed, that would be probably a fairly significant fight to get there. I go back to, and I know y'all think I'm stuck on this, but to the Shaw Center. I mean, I think there's some opportunities within our existing neighborhoods where we could go in and rehabilitate a lot of properties in there and really almost get to, not obviously not solve the problem, but certainly move in the right direction, and probably increase the number of basically livable affordable housings within some of our neighborhoods right now. Because there's some out there that are extremely derelict. And one of the things that's happening right now, we're really only talking to homeowners in these neighborhoods right now. We really need to be figuring out a way to try to work with some people that own those properties that, you know, obviously they're rentals to the current owners, and maybe try to figure out some solution there. I mean, I think Chad and I've talked about a couple ways that you might could go with some of those. And that might be another way to get there too.
Well, I totally agree. What the Shaw Center is doing great, helping the homes. But what we've said already is we need more smaller affordable homes. And the biggest enemy to getting affordable homes is homeowners like myself, who are in a neighborhood with all large land, single family homes. And so to say what you said, John, and you're right, there'll be pushback. All my neighbors will say no. But to say it is never allowed in any of our single family home neighborhoods like Camelot and Country Walk to build a duplex, that cuts off more than half of the property in Clemson, right? So to say it's sometimes allowed under these conditions, and we're putting in the ability to do that, not every lot in Country Walk, not every lot in wherever, but I'm just thinking we need to increase some smaller cost things. And one way to do that is the duplex triplex. And we've got to fight against the pushback of the neighbors who say, well, I don't want two people on that lot, and say, well, you've got two good neighbors. That could be a good thing.
Okay, we need to wrap up this section because it's 4:30 and my goal was just to finalize this. So we'll take another look at it. This is not going to be, you know, the King James version of the Bible. We will be able to come back and edit. Okay, the second section was investing. You can see where we ended up. Develop and implement a grassroots neighborhood planning effort and make it available to all neighborhoods in the city. So we batted around the idea of enforcement. So that's where we landed on that one. This was the one that we added to prevent displacement, improve quality of life, plan to rezone existing neighborhoods or put them into catalyst areas. Protect all residential neighborhoods as R12 or R20. And Eunice, this gets to the point you just made. And so I know Elaine, somebody else with the planning knowledge, the zoning knowledge might have something else to say there. John, this got to your comment, I believe, dedicate funds for implementation of infrastructure projects identified through the neighborhood planning effort. I do know that there's some proposals I think we're looking at tonight about underground electricity. We're talking about some conduit and some other issues. And it has come up about the issue of taxes, raising taxes to pay for some of the long overdue infrastructure projects. And last but not least, hire a community development director to strengthen the partnerships. This was part of Elaine's really great idea to talk about the neighborhood processes and to get our neighborhoods to be vocal. And then ensuring that funds are included for the legal, financial, and neighborhood needs. So we ended up with those four. Anybody have any edits?
Catherine, the one about the second one,
Yes.
about protect all residential neighborhoods is R12 and R20. Where are we putting neighborhoods like Cadillac Heights? Because they're RM2 and RM3.
Should we just say, I mean, I don't know I don't remember how we came up with R12 or R20. We can certainly just leave it at protect all residential neighborhoods.
And maybe that's what it needs to be, including those zoned RM2 or RM3. Because it's easy to tell which one's an actual neighborhood and which one's just a development that's built a bunch of apartments that's in an RM3 zone.
I thought the idea behind the rezoning was to consider whether or not moving towards R6, R12 and R20 might be a good idea for those neighborhoods. I mean, I'm not sure that's the way to do it.
There would be some additional protections there, Bill, I think.
Yeah, and you would end up with, and so I'd prefer going back to the way that we had it. I mean, people can argue about it, but it's one way to think about how to add to protections to those neighborhoods. And thank you.
So what if we
No,
just
but now-
change that to our districts, and let's think about this in, and I'm going to use Cadillac Heights as an example too. They are RM2 and RM3. And if you look at the zoning requirements, those lots are can be about 7,000 square feet. So maybe what we need to do is think about a new R6 or R7 that could be used in those to I don't know what you call it, up zone or down zone or whatever, but to change some of those RM2 and 3s to a single family district. Of course, there is, and to Eunice's point, there, if they're RM1, they can be duplexes. I don't know. I don't know the best way to go to protect, but I really want to see what we can do to protect those neighborhoods in particular.
Well, one thing you got to realize though, Elaine, some of those neighborhoods do have mobile homes. And so,
They can be grandfathered in.
Okay,
every other places they've grandfathered things in.
well, I just want to make sure we all
Yeah,
understood.
but no, yeah, it's an issue to consider.
Okay, I mean, because that part of the M component was about the mobile homes.
Right.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to mention, it seems like we go back and forth, and this is a tough problem that we have, but affordable housing requires having more affordable lots. It requires more affordable construction. And part of the way we're trying to protect neighborhoods from being developed is by increasing the zoning, like making them R12, R20. And like when they're RM1, they're at risk for being developed. That's what we're saying. And
Right.
yet we need affordable housing, more dense zonings, more reasonable dense zoning. And so I'm not sure we ever get at this problem with zoning. Like I think somehow like the whole solution to this is, if we build something that allows more density, we just know student development is going to go in there because there's such a high demand, right? But how do we ensure that goes to a family or somebody more affordable? And I think we have like a problem there between ensuring that those are actually not student housing. And I think that's more in a different solution. I think it's more in the rental housing licensing, for example. Like I think it's not perfect, but that's the closest we have to ensuring that the houses that are built are not just, piled in with a lot of students. So I don't know. I'm opposed.
Chad, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I think we have some neighborhoods in this town that need to be protected while they are being rehabilitated for the people that are living in them right now.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that. I was one of the people.
And I'm afraid the only way you can do that is through zoning.
Well, I would be fine. The historical African-American neighborhoods I would be fine changing their zoning and grandfathering in. What I'm saying is we kind of, in order to do that, we end up having the entire city being R12 and R20. And we get back to this point that Eunice and I are making, that we're not really going to have affordable housing if we have this limited supply everywhere. We've got to have a different tool in the toolbox eventually to be able to do this, or we're just going to be pushing the affordable housing further out where people can't afford to get here. I don't know. I'm just not seeing how I can see why we need to do that, and I would be fine with doing that, but our recommendations here aren't really helping the problem.
Is
There
there
are
a way to
certain- Go ahead.
Lillian, go ahead.
Is there a way to combine the idea of using the zoning tool as well as maybe an overlay ruling that we can do what you're talking about? So we can either not change the zoning and use an overlay for, you know, allowing the duplexes, triplexes, whatever, or vice versa.
So you can use an overlay to either add more restrictions or loosen the restrictions. So I think if you wanted to change the zoning, like you've been talking about changing the zoning, you might then be able to identify certain areas in the city where you'd want to allow duplexes and triplexes and things like that. And we could check and see if we could do that with an overlay district and just designate certain areas that those would be allowed in.
That's what's in my head.
Let me ask you this. If we're trying to protect the historic neighborhoods, could we not just make them all overlay districts?
I would think so. I mean, Charleston has a historic district. I'm trying to think what other towns I've been in that have a historic district that is literally, I don't know if they would call it an overlay anymore, but I mean, it literally is a district. If I'm not mistaken, I think Pendleton does for the square.
And going back to that description I had earlier about the two homes there in Vista, that would have been a perfect place for a triplex. So you'd gotten 3 families versus 2 out of that particular location.
That's just kind of been a thought that I've had all along is we do have conversations that will go down one road and then we'll reach a point where somebody brings up something like Eunice or Chad did and we go, now what? So if we can find a way to overlap those tools, that could be really, really useful.
Shannon, could we, for the time being, could we maybe make that as a solution until y'all vet it out further, is to create an overlay district?
Yeah, I'd like to see if we could, like how far that can go, like what kind of language we can use in those districts and what kind of restrictions they can encompass.
I think we're getting to the point where we're going to have a joint meeting with y'all in the land use group to talk about all of the different overlay districts in the catalyst areas. So I'll work on setting that up and I can send you all some more information on overlays too. We can look at as we continue to move forward with this.
Okay. And then last but not least, I probably should have started with this because it always ends up being at the end when we've kind of used up our energy. This happens to the best of us.
I think, you know, the sooner the better.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. And some of this goes without saying in a way, encourage Clemson to develop student housing. Duh. Sorry. Cultivate student housing development in specific catalyst areas. Now, as I think Elaine has noted before, you know, we need to be careful about that. We have never created just a student housing area. And I can already hear the discussion we will have with the Clemson Chief of Police on this. But that's in there.
So that one is also specifically being dealt with by the land use group. And it's, I think if you guys wanted to take that out of this, you could take it out of this because it is going to be covered, I think, with the catalyst areas that the land use group is working on.
Yeah, and that's part of that whole catalyst discussion, isn't it? You're right. We're gonna have to do it.
So I think you can take that out of your recommendations and we can work with them.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Anything that takes these out. Okay. Accurate database. I do think that's important and I'm all about that. Shannon, one of the questions I'll have is if that's something that is where that responsibility will lie. And I'm trying to be very nice about this in terms of past efforts to get good student housing data. So let's just see what we can come up with in terms of creating that database.
You know, that might lie with either the new development person that is in some of these recommendations. But I think there's some different places where that information can come from.
Okay. Because yeah, it would be nice to know. And you know, if it falls in with what you provided to us a couple weeks ago, you know, my immediate comment is, well, let's stop building freaking student housing. But that's okay. By the way, guys, I've had conversations in various places when I run in and talk to people. It is true, the conversations we've had, that if you're just a normal average adult and you want to rent an apartment in Clemson, you almost can't do it. And so that is something that we're all talking about that I think would be very positively received. That's the purpose-built student housing. That's where we just were. Continue to utilize and strengthen the rental housing program. I think we're there. And then last but not least was this one, use the plan development process and homeowners associations, I should be in apostrophe there, to target new housing options. I'm personally hesitant about HOAs, but I know other people like them. So I think you're right, Shannon. I think a lot of this falls under a better strategy discussion with land use.
Right. So number 3, you can take out because they're already working on that. And like I say, I encourage you all to listen in or join into that meeting Wednesdays at 8:30. That's what they're going to start tackling.
Well, I'm not trying to put myself out of a job here, but if most of housing relates to land use, then do we need us to do anything? Because that's kind of.
I think they are really focused on those catalyst areas. And I think where we need you guys to focus is figuring out what we were talking about under that first situation. What do we do for workforce and affordable housing?
Yeah, but
do we use overlays? Do we tackle the zoning? How do we move forward with that? Because that's the important piece that they're not really diving deep into, that we're going to need to bring to these discussions of catalyst areas.
Okay. Chad?
Can I make a comment on number 3? I have different issues with the rental housing licensing program, but I think some of it's kind of bureaucratic, and I deal with it a lot as a landlord, but at the same time, I think it's one of the more effective tools, like I said earlier, in order to use zoning more wisely to allow density while still not allowing it to be like free reign student housing. And could we change that, instead of saying single family neighborhoods, mitigating the encroachment of student rentals into all residential neighborhoods? Because I don't know how that tool can work, but perhaps it can be more nuanced, and it could be a rental housing license everywhere, so that people can, maybe there's some other way of like saying, if you have 2 people living in a house, that's not enough, that you can't do that in this neighborhood. I don't know. There might be some ways, but I think that's one of our more important tools, along with the overlays, if we're going to avoid just constantly upzoning everything.
Now, let me ask you a question, Chad, because I know the basics of the program, of course, but do you pay a fee every year?
Yes, but per apartment now. It used to be, this program has started for single family neighborhoods, so you wanted to avoid the Animal House and College Avenue area somewhere, so you'd have, instead of having 5 students in a house, you can only have 2 people who are unrelated. And so every year for a single family house, you pay $100 for a rental license. But it's kind of a hodgepodge program now. You have single families, you have duplexes that are in single family neighborhoods, you have what they define as townhouses. So anything it could be a 4-unit building, but if it doesn't have a condo on top of it, that's in the rental housing program, whether it's RM4, RM2, doesn't matter. But then if you have a 12-unit building next door to it, and it happens to have condos where people live on top of each other instead of next to each other, that's not in the rental housing program. So it's, a 400 unit apartment is not in the rental housing program. So it's kind of a weird, it's been slowly increased, the amount of number of units that are involved in the program, but I'm not sure it's kind of a inefficient, it's incomplete tool, I guess I would call it.
Well,
that would be an interesting way where you could actually now truly track your beds, your actual beds. In other words, if all of those buildings were in the program in some form or fashion, and then it'd be almost a foolproof way to know exactly how many beds were within the city limits of Clemson and being used for students.
Well, there's a few things I love more than working on a good database. So that seems like a good project.
We'll say that's another recommendation that the land use group is working on, is expanding the rental housing program into all of those apartment buildings, and figuring out a new fee structure, because they'd have to hire more inspectors. So expanding that program to capture all of the beds in the city is something that they are looking at in their recommendations.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Jane, I was just gonna add, I'm not sure, is this conversation coming up that if you increase it from the 1,000 units you have now to like 5,000 units, and you look at it, one thing I'm afraid of as a small landlord is that, you know, we pay $100 per unit. It's like a 50% increase in your tax in some cases, your property taxes compared to what it was before. Is that if you have 5,000 units instead of 1,000, can you reduce the fee structure and then broaden the base instead of having it be like, I just see it as like, oh, here's another way we can make money and charge all the landlords to pay for a couple more staff members. That's what's going to happen. As
Right. They have not gotten that far into the details yet. As far as they've gotten is, if we do expand this, we are going to need to add city staff to deal with the extra inspections. So, I mean, that's a great point, and we can bring that into discussions.
Okay.
I think there's going to be a lot of nuance in there.
I think it's just a really, really good way. It's a way really truthfully to track inventory. I think I think it's almost foolproof, and that's why I would support it. And I get what you're saying, Chad. And so, to me, the end game is understanding the number of bids more so than the other.
Okay, Elaine, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise one point, and I don't know how we do this or for what it's worth, but we know that to keep housing affordable, it's not going to always be a single family home for a family. So we need to think about where are apartments in the city of Clemson that could either be renovated, restored, refurbished, whatever the right term is. And if we have a definition for purpose-built student housing, then we would still have a definition for RM4. And I'd like to think that RM4 would be such that it would be by the apartment rentals that would be suitable for families. And maybe it's not 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, maybe it's 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, or what some of the more traditional apartments in the past have been. I'd just like to put that out there, because as we think of ways to do it, this may be one to expand our opportunities for affordable housing.
I think, and getting back to what Chad was just saying, if we do have just a little bit of leverage probably with some of these things, that if we could maybe reduce a fee or reduce something if they were renting per apartment, maybe we make that more friendly to the landlords. I don't know if that's possible, but it's something to think about. I'm sorry, Eunice? Did we lose Eunice? We might have lost Eunice. I think we lost Eunice. Okay. Okay, anything else? Shannon, is there, do you see anything else that you have questions about?
I don't think so. Catherine, why don't you and I chat later this week and clean these up and send them out to everyone to review and get some more comments on?
I'm good anytime Wednesday or later.
Okay.
After today, I got to make up tomorrow, and then maybe it'll be better.
All right. So we'll do that, send them back out to the group for everybody to comment on, and then do final walkthrough of these next Monday.
Yep. Actually, I'll probably send them out after we meet and have everybody vote from there.
Okay.
If you guys want to finesse any language, now is your time. And I think that there are some good projects that we have in here. And from here, then Shannon noted, we can sort of focus on this part of what we're doing, because the other ones seem to relate very much to land use. So we don't really have a job. Elaine?
Yeah, I was just wondering let me make sure I wasn't muted. I was wondering what, if we get to these and we make recommendations, then are we as a committee at a point that we've met our charge, or will we continue to do additional things? Like, is the transit committee continuing to meet, or they've submitted their recommendations and that's all they've done now?
They have been waiting to make sure the implementation committee doesn't have questions or come back to them. They're going to continue to meet, but less often. So what they are going to do is to continue to meet to try to flesh out some of their recommendations, details on how those will be implemented. And they're probably going to meet bi-monthly or once a month to continue to work on that.
So that might be
that would
what
be
we
your
would do then. So that might be what we would do then.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so our next focus then will be on really on this affordable housing discussion. And what there are two things that are in the works. And I know that we just discussed sort of disbanding, but there are a couple of things we're doing. And I would encourage you, one of the discussions we have not had in affordable housing, and I don't know the answer to this, so this is just literally a question that I have not had time to research, is there's some pieces out there in the news about new modular homes and those kinds of options. I do not know our zoning rules on modular homes, if they count the same as mobile homes these days. I don't think so. But
Describe in your mind a modular home.
well, that's my issue, John, is that now I'm seeing that from the outside, I can't tell the difference.
So here's my question. A lot of places the zoning has to do with if it's on a slab or not. So we have to find out if our language is like that or if it's more complex.
Well, but what you're saying though, Catherine, is a modular home is essentially what we in the past would have called a mobile home, but they do so well now that they essentially, I mean, they basically look like stick-built homes.
Manufactured homes.
Yeah,
manufactured. That's a better term. That's a better term.
There's a company called S2 Modular, the number 2 Modular, that has popped up in my mailings. And I guess it's because I've been looking at too much housing stuff. You know how the internet is. And so that's an interesting group. And then
yeah, so that's something definitely worth looking into. We actually own a modular home in Greenwood, and the zoning is, I mean, it's apples and oranges when it comes to zoning because this is a different beast, but the way that their zoning dealt with it is if it has been relocated in any way, or if it has a slab or not. There's a bunch of different things there. So we can pull up that language and see, because that could definitely be something that could be tweaked to kind of help with that, like Chad said, designating between a mobile home or a modular home that's assembled on site.
Well, the only thing I guess I'm going to throw there, I mean, are they really that much cheaper than a stick-built home?
That's where I don't know the answer to that.
Not really. I mean, it depends, but not really.
I didn't think so. I mean, because they look pretty nice. Generally the giveaway is the fact that the slope of the roof isn't maybe as steep as a stick-built home, but that's about the only giveaway on the homes. Really.
So in the future, I think it will be. I mean, California is experimenting somewhat, particularly with tiny houses and backyards, like accessory dwelling units, where they can bring in with a crane a small, like they call it modular unit, but they put it on a foundation in the backyard for a 50 to 100,000 less than the stick-built version. So I think it can be, if there's a market for it, and zoning and building codes do prohibit that market some. So I think it's worth looking into for sure if we want to be thinking on that.
You're talking about a housing solution. I mean, we used to call them park models, but essentially it doesn't have a tongue. And it is what you're saying, Chad, for the most part. I mean, they'll be probably 600 to 800 square feet. I doubt they're 800, but probably more like about 600 square feet. But I mean, there's a lot of scenarios out there where those things are in place. Sometimes we call them tiny homes, but I think that the tiny homes over in what do you call it in Easley? I can't think of the name of it.
Dream Center.
Yeah, those Dream Center tiny homes, I think, are smaller than that. And so that you really couldn't have one or two, maybe a couple, an older couple living in those particular homes. But I didn't know maybe if the small homes like that, not the ones over at Dream Center, but others, might be another way to go with some level of affordable housing. I think we got to better understand what the source of those homes are, what they cost, and everything.
Well, I just didn't know, so I'm happy to do some research and provide you guys with sort of a one pager with some. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say I know we're getting ready to wind down, and I wanted to give Rosa and Tiffany a chance for some input because I think they're the only ones we haven't heard anything from yet.
Well, first, thank you all. How y'all doing?
What's up, Rosa?
Hey, Rosa.
Listen, I was so busy trying to finish up my summer pay on the job. I got until tomorrow. That's why I wasn't saying anything. But I will be back full blast on Monday because I was thinking about the zoning for the African American neighborhoods. And I was putting thought into that. And of course, John is gonna correct me every chance he gets. So when next Monday come, I'm gonna be ready. But this has been off the chain for the past few weeks, okay? So thank you all. Go ahead, Tim.
I don't know if I can say it any better than that. No, I've just honestly been absorbing. Obviously, looking forward to the conversation next week. But this is not as much my domain, so I've been doing more listening and digesting, and just trying to take in the comments that everybody else has made. So I don't have anything more to add, and I think any questions I had have been clarified. So I'm good to go. But thanks for the acknowledgement.
For the shout out.
Yeah.
Shout out to those in the balcony.
And one more thing, I just want to tell y'all, John was there, Rosa was there on Saturday. We had to me, it was very emotional event when we did a drive-by for the lady whose house the Shaw Center brought up to speed for her to be able to live there with some handicap accessible issues. The police were there, the fire department was there, blacks, whites. It was like 30 or more cars that had signs on the side, and Sam and her sister were sitting out front close to the road, and all these people driving by, and it was just like the whole community came together to celebrate that. And that's what I hope we can work toward as part of what we're doing with this housing approach too.
That would be great. I think that some people, and I understand this, we all have our daily craziness, is, we forget what's possible sometimes and what we can do when we help people in need. So I think that's great. And on that warm, fuzzy note, I am going to abandon ship. John and I are heading to City Hall. If you guys need anything, as always, call Chad. I need to catch up with you this week. I'm presenting tonight on the Issaquena issue. So we're going to talk about that.
Let me know. I'll be happy
I
to
will.
help.
Okay, guys, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.